Question: does Counter-Strike 2 have a run and gun problem, or is this game just slowly turning into Valorant? To a lot of people, that is a legitimate concern. One that I would say isn't completely unfounded, thanks in part to clips like the one I just showed you. But is it actually true? Is the running accuracy in CS2 too good? Let's discuss.
Before we get into today's video, I wanted to thank our sponsor Cash App for helping us create an entire season of our brand new character-focused show, Mains. Cash App makes it easy to invest in yourself. A Cash App card can give you a ton of perks. Enjoy great discounts at your favorite stores and exclusive benefits like early access to concert pre-sales for artists like Drake, Karol G, Future, and Sabrina Carpenter. Thanks again to Cash App for sponsoring this video. Go check out an episode of Mains over on our YouTube channel, and check out Cash App using the link in the description.
Okay, so back in October, Twist posted a small rant on Twitter highlighting a bunch of his current issues with CS2. Most of them were related to the general networking and performance issues we've heard time and time again and still haven't been fixed, but there was one in particular that caught my attention. See, his first gripe was about running and shooting, saying, quote, "seems more accurate than ever. Maybe it went unnoticed in CSGO because less people tried. I feel like it's a normal thing to try and do now." My ears immediately perked up because the question of run and gun viability has been something rattling around in my brain for quite some time now. When CS2 first dropped and I started playing and watching, one of the first thoughts in my head was, are people just moving and shooting all the time, specifically crouch spraying just all the time? And back then, I was far from the only person who felt like this. It felt like every time I died, it was to someone running or slowly crab walking across my screen for whatever reason, despite them moving, their bullets magnet to my head. Then, when pro play started up, I was seeing it even more. Some of the best players in the world crouching and spraying and somehow getting the job done every single time. And then, Donk came along. At first glance, this kid was moving so much while shooting, ducking, crab walking, and sliding his way through the best players in the world. And though I would see people bring up this issue, they seemed more amazed by it than concerned. So I just assumed that maybe I was just shit. In reality, Donk and others were just perfectly strafing and not actually moving and shooting. But then I saw this.
B-Rush, when in doubt.
Lines him up and knocks down one. Team killing. Oh! It's Malbs! Flattens Na'Vi in his wake in pursuit of taking that one. It's all hanging in Malbs' balance.
At first look, Malbs, a great player, was effectively running and gunning. And memes aside, it did spawn yet another discussion about running and gunning and its viability in CS2. One with a common counter-argument that has held me off from talking about this subject for a while now. You see, to an extent, running and gunning has been in Counter-Strike since the very beginning, as it does with virtually every shooter. 1.6 was probably the least guilty of it, but Source was pretty much a tribes game, and of course, CSGO had it as well, especially with certain pistols and SMGs, and it faced criticism for it. But they all do have a reason for it. Every shooter has a reason for running and gunning. The RNG of praying and spraying or moving while shooting does add an exciting element. Sometimes unfair, yes, but still a necessary one. Knowing that a single stray lucky bullet can change the outcome of a firefight keeps people on their toes. Mastering a game's movement and your weapons, knowing what you can potentially get away with, adds to the fluidity of the gameplay. Otherwise, it would just be like trading musket fire back and forth. The challenge is, how accurate do you make it? You don't want to make running and gunning a legit meta, but at the same time, it would feel kind of silly to be 5 feet away from someone and somehow miss every shot just because you're moving. I think for the most part, people understand that there needs to be a balance. It's just that Valve might have made CS2 a little closer to Source in Valorant than CSGO.
The running accuracy in CS2 is out of this world. Something I think Valve will have to address at some point, but I'm just going to showcase you how strong it is right now. I'm not gonna let go of my W key, I'm just gonna full send it and look how accurate the CC is when you're just running around. I haven't let go of my W. I'm not gonna lie, my grandma could kill me in this game.
Now, CS2's comparisons to Valorant have been tossed around for a while now, with movement and running and gunning being two of the bigger examples people like to point at. I personally think some people are being a little dramatic. Valorant has had a long and well-documented issue with running and gunning, one that they're still trying to fix to this day. And on top of that, many CS fans will argue that these aspects are no worse now than they were in CSGO, and that maybe fandom are just looking for another excuse to shit on CS2 because they already have problems. I'm not saying the gunplay of Valorant and Counter-Strike can't be compared or shouldn't be, but it's just that maybe the argument isn't always made in good faith. That being said, some still say that the level of run and gun is too ridiculous in CS2, while others disagree. So which is actually closer to the truth? Well, in response to that original post back in October by Twist, Elige actually linked a clip of what he called a bug showing the accuracy reset when crouching while strafing. And he also claimed that this was present in CSGO. That could have put the debate to bed for a lot of people. But then a few days later, Twist just had to go and post his own meme of his new warm-up routine, running and gunning, and it popped the f off on Twitter. And in that post, you had more people arguing whether or not it's an intentional mechanic or not, if it's gotten worse or better, and so on. But there was still no consensus. I even tried myself. I hopped into both games, and I couldn't really tell a difference. I mean, at the end of the day, these are two different games and two different engines. Now, Twist did follow up by saying a lot of this might have to do with the fact that he is a moving target, which makes him harder to hit, which gives him more time for one of his bullets to eventually find a target. He also suggests network issues, which make it often look like players are still moving rather than hitting a strafe or standing still when they kill you. Okay, both those reasons make sense to me. I finally think we're starting to get somewhere. And then I saw Vu's video. You see, Counter-Strike content creator Vu also wanted an answer to this question because, yeah, a lot of these clips look f***ed. So he did some tests himself and also couldn't find any real major differences. He also pointed out that most of Twist's kills happen when his accuracy reset because he was perfectly strafing and because he's moving target most of the time. But then he took it a step further by looking at the time to damage for 5 pros and how it's gone up by roughly 25 milliseconds, meaning that pros aren't hitting their targets as quickly as they used to. And his suggestion as to why this might be the most conclusive answer we have to this question yet. You see, because enemies are now harder to hit, the logical solution would be to make yourself harder to hit as well. But the only way to really make yourself harder to hit in Counter-Strike is by moving around more. And when you're moving around more, you're often going to shoot at the same time, which is going to increase your likelihood of getting a kill while moving.
You're not hitting people quite as quickly, or they're harder to hit for some reason, and that thereby you're thinking more about how do I make myself hard to hit instead of how do I hit my opponent quicker, and then you end up moving in this direction, even if technically it's not any more accurate than it was, which I don't think it is. I kind of think that maybe because of subtick or something along those lines, people are just a little bit harder to hit in CS2, and so there's a push towards making yourself harder to hit. Personally, that means there's a push towards, well, how much can I get away with moving while still shooting?
In other words, maybe the meta has shifted a bit. Maybe making yourself harder to hit has become the new strat over raw aim, strafing, and peeking. And the reason it feels like running and gunning is better now is just because more people are trying. To be fair, this has been the argument by many for quite some time now, but Vu pulling up some numbers does give it a lot more evidence. So check out his full video to see his thoughts and experiments. Now, as to why it feels like enemies are harder to hit, I'm afraid that if anyone has the answer to that, it would be Valve. Maybe it is simply just related to the game's performance, and eventually they will fix it. But alternatively, what if this is intentional and people are just noticing it now? Do we like that? As I said before, running and gunning has to exist to a certain extent. But at the same time, Counter-Strike is a game largely about the mechanical control we have of the guns we use. So what should the balance be? If the accuracy is the same as it was in CSGO, but people are just doing it more now, does it mean that Valve needs to step in to nerf it to avoid a meta that technically rewards less mechanical play? Run and gun does sound cool. It's also something that like you can go in and actively just try. Because like if it's an FPS issue that the game's facing, it's just like, okay, well that's that's making my experience worse. Yeah. But if someone's just like, this gun is crazy, or running and gunning is crazy, it's like, well, I mean, if you can't beat them, join them.